Now we'll be covering the topic of plagiarism, which I actually hinted towards in our pre-test today. So plagiarism, you see there's a criminal with the word plagiarism. So plagiarism is an act, for instance, of using or closely imitating the language and thoughts of another author without authorization. The representation of that author's work as one's own as by not crediting the original author. So in that pre-test, you recall, there was actually a case, I did actually mention at least trying to claim that the author's original work was not their own, or not properly citing or crediting the author as the creator of that particular piece of work. Or in this case, the act of using or imitating the intellectual property of the author. In this case, worded as language and thoughts of the other author. So when you commit plagiarism, it would be plagiarism if you were to use a particular piece of work that someone make and either claim it as your own, or actually make use of that particular piece of work without permission from the author. Or in this case, closely imitating, making a copy of the author's work. Like, even if it's not exactly the exact same piece of work that the author made, you cannot, however, start making a piece of work based on the author's original idea without crediting them. Example would be in case of Harry Potter series. You cannot actually, even if you're not directly copying the books word for word, if you make a Harry Potter book that clearly is based on the author's work, and you make money from it, and you did not even bother to actually even ask permission for the author to even make a piece of work based on their world, you have effectively committed an act of plagiarism here. So it's always important, you can't just actually copy, or at least just imitate very closely, and then this is an important piece of wording, very closely the work of another author without their permission, and also in some cases without compensation to that author. Now the part about closely imitating is important because while you're not allowed to closely imitate the work, you are, however, allowed to sort of take inspiration from the work. Now, in order to help differentiate whether or not you're taking inspiration from the work or just outright imitating it, you will have to at least do something creative with the original, with that idea seen before. And so in this case, while you cannot exactly make a copy of Harry Potter himself, you can potentially make a character that is clearly inspired by Harry Potter. However, that character cannot be such a close carbon copy of the original Harry Potter to the point that the two copies are almost, hard to distinguish. Though in these cases, however, authors, when they try to make such inspirations like this, such as making inspiration based on Harry Potter, they tend to consult at least legal experts in this case, so as to ensure that they don't directly infringe on the right of the original author. Now, moving on, in terms of types of plagiarism, this is to help, as you've already been heard, we have actually over 6 types of plagiarism. So first, we'll start with the ghostwriter. This type of plagiarism, the writer turns in another's work, word for word, as his or her own. So in this case, the author isn't taking inspiration anymore. He is just directly copying the work. This is literally the equivalent of someone copying your assignment or homework and then passing it off as their own. So this ghostwriter, they're just actually outright copying the author's original piece of work. Next is the photocopier. Now the difference between the ghostwriter and the photocopier is that the photocopier copies significant portions of text straight from a single source without alteration. So like if you ever use a photocopier, there will be segments of documents that you would like to have copies of, so you actually photocopy those particular segments. This is the same thing that the photocopier does. Compared to the ghostwriter, where they actually copy an entire word for word, here the photocopier only takes sizable portions of that text straight from them, and they do not ever credit the original author as the source of that particular text. Next is the potluck paper. The writer copies from different sources and alters the sentences to make them fit together while retaining most of the original phrasing. Sorry, excuse me. So, so the potluck paper, as you can see, is similar to the photocopy in that they copy significant portions of text. But the difference is that they copy text not from a single source. It's important to note the difference. The photocopier only copies significant portions of text straight from only one source. However, the potluck paper, they copy their work from multiple different sources and they make alterations to it in order to ensure that they actually fit together, that they don't feel like they came from many different pieces of work. However, the original phrasing is present, so if one were to look at their creation, even if the sentences fit together, the way they're worded, it is too close to the original piece of work that they actually copied from. The remaining three other kinds of plagiarism includes the poor disguise, where the writer has altered the paper's appearance slightly by changing keywords or phrases. In this case, the writer, compared to the ghostwriter who just copies the entire work word for word, the poor disguise is a little smarter in that they will alter the certain keywords and phrases so that it would seem like the piece of work is its own. Think of the entire joke going around of, okay, okay, I'm letting you copy my homework, but make sure to change it a bit so that the teacher won't notice. And yes, as the teacher constantly checking your work, if you think I did not notice some of you repeating your pieces of work even though you modified some sentences, congratulations, you became a poor disguise. And honestly, after seeing so many pieces of work, there's a good chance I can at least pick out the poor disguises among you. Anyways, moving on, the labor of laziness. The writer takes the time to paraphrase most of the paper from other sources and make it all fit together. So here, the labor of laziness. This person's a little smarter than the potluck paper since instead of just trying to essentially just make sure the sentences fit but leave the original phrasing or how it's worded. In this case, the labor of laziness writer, they effectively do their best effort to paraphrase the paper so that at the very least at the end of the day, it would at least look like it is their own piece of work. Now in this case, the labor of laziness would technically not be under plagiarism if it wasn't for the fact that they are missing one key component here. And it is the fact that despite their paraphrasing and their attempts to make all those sections of text actually fit together in their work, they do not, however, as mentioned here, ever cite the original author. So in the end, the sin of the labor of laziness is that even though they're taking effort to paraphrase the work so that it will not be a direct copy of another work, and they make sure that all the sentences fit together so that it doesn't look like it's made from multiple sources, the labor of laziness still actually claims the piece of work as their own, as they do not make actually any citation to to those original authors or sources that he used. And finally, the self-stealer. The writer borrows generously from his or her previous work. So the way this works, if you were to write a piece of thesis and then you actually put citation and then you put information and in that particular thesis there are actually entire segments there that came straight from your previous work. However, you do not make any indication in that particular thesis that those segments are from your previous work, and so you make it seem like those segments are actually part of your current original work. This is the self-stealer. You're essentially stealing from yourself, and what actually makes this actually more apparent is that you're not even making any indication that those pieces of segments came from your own previous work. You're effectively trying to claim those segments as part of your original work instead of honestly citing or indicating that those segments are from your previous work. Moving on. Sources not cited but still plagiarized include the forgotten footnote. The writer mentions an author's name from a source but neglects to include specific information and location to material referenced. Then the misinformer, the writer provides inaccurate information regarding the sources, making it impossible to find them. In this case, I really would highly recommend once you start writing your thesis papers to make sure to at least be as accurate as possible so that when anyone wishes to trace your sources, they can at least easily find them.